At Riverside Academy's annual winter formal, quiet newcomer Sophia Martinez stands frozen in horror as her handmade dress lies in tatters around her feet, torn apart by the school's most popular clique in front of 200 classmates. But when Madison Pierce and her crew push too far, they unleash a fury they never saw coming, one trained in the ancient art of Muay Thai, where elbows and knees become weapons of justice. What happens next will shatter more than just fabric. It will destroy the social hierarchy that has ruled this school for years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Riverside Academy as 17-year-old Sophia Martinez pressed her face to the glass of the yellow school bus, watching the sprawling campus emerge through the morning mist. The prestigious private school in Connecticut looked like something from a movie. Red brick buildings covered in ivy, manicured lawns, and students who carried themselves with the confidence that came from old money and older traditions. Sophia's reflection stared back at her, dark brown eyes filled with uncertainty. Her long black hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and she wore a simple navy sweater and jeans that suddenly felt inadequate compared to the designer uniforms she glimpsed through the windows. This was her 5th school in 6 years, thanks to her mother's career as a military contractor that kept their family constantly moving. But Riverside Academy felt different, more intimidating, more exclusive, more everything she wasn't. The bus shuddered to a stop, and Sophia gathered her worn leather messenger bag, a gift from her grandmother in El Paso who'd saved for months to buy it. As she stepped off the bus, the crisp October air hit her face, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and privilege. Groups of students clustered around the entrance, their conversations peppered with references to vacation homes in the Hamptons and weekend trips to Manhattan. Sophia pulled her sweater tighter and navigated through the crowd, her combat boots practical and comfortable clicking against the marble floors of the main entrance. The hallways were lined with portraits of distinguished alumni, their stern faces seeming to judge every student who passed beneath them. She clutched her schedule and locker combination, trying to decode the maze of corridors that would become her new reality. "Excuse me," she said softly to a girl with perfectly styled blonde hair who was adjusting her makeup at a compact mirror. "Do you know where room 204 is?" The girl looked up, her ice blue eyes scanning Sophia from head to toe with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to categorizing people into social hierarchies. "Second floor, East Wing," she replied curtly before snapping her compact shut and walking away without another word. Sophia found her way to advanced placement history, sliding into an empty seat near the back just as the bell rang. Mrs. Whitmore, a stern woman in her 50s wearing pearls and a tailored blazer, began discussing the fall semester project, a research paper on social movements throughout American history. As she spoke, Sophia noticed several students glancing back at her, whispering behind their hands. "The new girl," she heard someone murmur. "I heard she's on scholarship." Heat crept up Sophia's neck. It was true, her mother's military service had earned her a need-based scholarship to Riverside Academy, but the way they said it made it sound like a disease. She focused on her notebook, taking detailed notes in the neat handwriting she'd perfected over years of constantly adapting to new schools. During lunch, Sophia sat alone in the corner of the elegant dining hall, unwrapping the sandwich she'd packed that morning. The room buzzed with conversation and laughter, but she felt invisible, like a ghost haunting the edges of other people's lives. She watched the social dynamics play out before her, the athletes at their table by the windows, the drama club, kids near the stage, and in the center of it all, the table that commanded everyone's attention. Madison Pierce held court like a queen, her auburn hair cascading over her shoulders in perfect waves. She wore the regulation uniform, a white blouse and navy blazer, but somehow made it look like haute couture. Her friends Jessica Chun and Amber Rodriguez flanked her like ladies-in-waiting, hanging on her every word. Madison's father owned half the commercial real estate in the county, and her mother sat on the school's board of directors. She was untouchable, and she knew it. "Did you see the new girl's boots?" Jessica giggled, her voice carrying across the room. "Very urban." Madison's laugh was like tinkling glass, beautiful but sharp. "I'm sure she'll find her place eventually. Everyone does." Sophia pretended not to hear, but her grip tightened on her sandwich. She'd learned long ago that responding to comments like these only made things worse. Better to blend in, stay quiet, and wait for the next move to provide a fresh start. After lunch, she had advanced placement literature with Mr. Davidson, a kind man with wire-rimmed glasses who actually seemed interested in her thoughts on the assigned reading. When he asked about her previous schools, she mentioned her time at a public school in Arizona, where she'd been on the debate team and had volunteered at a local community center. "That's wonderful," Mr. Davidson said warmly. "Real-world experience is invaluable. I hope you'll consider joining our debate team here." For the first time all day, Sophia felt a spark of hope. Maybe she could find her place here after all. The feeling lasted until she walked into the girls' bathroom after her last class. Madison and her friends were there, reapplying lipstick and gossiping about the upcoming winter formal dance. The conversation stopped abruptly when Sophia entered. Well, Madison said, turning to face her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How was your first day, scholarship girl?" Sophia's jaw clenched, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "Fine, thank you." "That's good to hear," Madison continued, stepping closer. "I hope you understand how things work here. Riverside Academy has certain standards. We wouldn't want anyone to feel out of place." Jessica and Amber exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of amusement and anticipation. Sophia recognized the dynamic. She'd seen it at every school she'd attended. The popular kids established dominance, marking their territory, ensuring the new girl knew her place in the pecking order. "I understand," Sophia said quietly, moving toward the door. "Oh, and Sophia," Madison called out sweetly, "the winter formal is in 2 weeks. I'm sure you'll find something appropriate to wear." The dismissal was clear, but it was the laughter that followed Sophia out the door that really stung. She walked quickly toward her locker, her cheeks burning with humiliation. This was how it always started: small comments, subtle exclusions, the gradual erosion of confidence until she became exactly what they expected, invisible. At home that evening, Sophia sat at the kitchen table of their modest rental house telling her mother about her day. Maria Martinez was a strong woman in her early 40s, her hair streaked with premature gray from years of managing military contracts and raising a daughter alone. She listened intently while preparing dinner, her weathered hands moving efficiently as she chopped vegetables. "You know, Mia," her mother said carefully, "your father used to say that the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire." Sophia looked up from her homework. Her father had died in a training accident when she was 12, but her mother still quoted him regularly, keeping his memory alive through his words of wisdom. "I know, Mom. It's just ... This school is different. These kids, they've never had to worry about anything real. They live in a bubble, and they want to keep it that way." Maria sat down across from her daughter, her expression serious. "You have something they don't, Sophia. You have resilience. You've been tested in ways they can't imagine, and you've always come through stronger." What her mother didn't know, what Sophia had kept carefully hidden, was the other thing that made her different. For the past 3 years since they'd lived in Nevada, she'd been training in Muay Thai at a small gym run by a former professional fighter named Coach Rivera. It had started as a way to stay in shape and build confidence, but it had become something more: a sanctuary where she could channel her frustration and anger into something constructive. Coach Rivera, A compact man with scarred knuckles and kind eyes had taught her that Muay Thai wasn't just about fighting. It was about discipline, respect, and understanding your own strength. The art of 8 limbs used fists, elbows, knees, and shins as weapons. But the real power came from within, from knowing who you were and what you stood for. Sophia had promised herself she would never use her training outside the gym. She'd seen what happened when people used their skills for the wrong reasons, and she refused to become that person. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and replaying Madison's words, she felt a familiar fire burning in her chest, the same fire that had carried her through every challenge, every move, every new beginning. The next morning brought fresh humiliation. Someone had taped a mock scholarship application to her locker, complete with boxes to check for financial hardship and social inadequacy. Students walked by, some laughing, others looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. Sophia crumpled the paper and threw it away, but the damage was done. Word spread quickly through the school's social media networks, and by lunch, she could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. Madison and her friends sat at their usual table, occasionally glancing in Sophia's direction and whispering among themselves. The message was clear. This was just the beginning. They were testing her, seeing how far they could push before she broke or fought back. The winter formal was announced officially that afternoon, and the excitement was palpable. Posters went up advertising the enchanted winter theme, complete with promises of professional photography, a live DJ, and a catered dinner. For most students, it was the social event of the season. For Sophia, it felt like a deadline too. Weeks to either find her place or face her biggest humiliation yet. That weekend, she and her mother went shopping for a dress. Their budget was tight, but Maria had been saving for months, knowing how important these social events could be for a teenager trying to fit in. They found a beautiful emerald green dress at a discount store, simple but elegant, with a flowing skirt that moved like water when Sophia walked. "You look beautiful, Mia," her mother said, tears in her eyes as Sophia modeled the dress in the store's tiny fitting room. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But even as Sophia smiled and nodded, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. Madison Pierce and her friends weren't the type to simply ignore someone they'd marked as a target. They were planning something, and the winter formal would be the perfect stage for their final act. As the days passed, the tension at school grew thicker. Sophia tried to focus on her studies, even joining the debate team as Mr. Davidson had suggested, but she could feel the storm building around her. Small incidents multiplied. Her textbooks went missing. Her lunch was accidentally knocked over, and anonymous notes appeared in her locker with cruel messages about her clothes, her background, her very existence at Riverside Academy. Through it all, she maintained her composure, drawing on the mental discipline Coach Rivera had taught her. "A true warrior," he used to say, "knows when to fight and when to wait, but they never, ever forget who they are." The night before the formal, Sophia stood in front of her bedroom mirror, the emerald dress hanging behind her like a promise. She'd made it through 2 weeks at Riverside Academy, survived the initial assault on her confidence, and even found small victories in her classes and on the debate team. But she knew that tomorrow night would be different. Tomorrow night, Madison Pierce would make her move, and Sophia would have to decide who she really was, the quiet girl who hid in the shadows, or something else entirely. As she drifted off to sleep, her last thought was of Coach Rivera's voice. "The ring doesn't lie, Sophia. It strips away all pretense and shows you exactly who you are. Remember that when the time comes." The time, she realized, was almost here. The grand ballroom of the Riverside Country Club sparkled under hundreds of crystal chandeliers, transformed into a winter wonderland with artificial snow, towering ice sculptures, and silver birch trees wrapped in twinkling lights. Students arrived in elegant gowns and sharp tuxedos, their parents dropping them off in luxury cars that formed a parade of wealth along the circular driveway. Sophia stood at the entrance, her emerald dress catching the light as she took in the magnificent scene. Her mother had driven her in their modest Honda Civic, parking several blocks away to avoid the embarrassment of their car being seen among the Mercedes and BMWs. The dress her mother had saved for looked beautiful at home. But here, surrounded by designer gowns that cost more than their monthly rent, Sophia felt like an imposter in a palace. "You look stunning, dear," Mrs. Henderson, the school's elderly librarian, said warmly as she checked names off the guest list. "Have a wonderful evening." Sophia forced a smile and stepped into the ballroom, immediately overwhelmed by the grandeur. A live jazz quartet played in one corner while couples swayed on the polished dance floor. Round tables draped in white silk surrounded the dance area, each centerpiece an elaborate arrangement of white roses and winter greenery. The air smelled of expensive perfume, and the catered dinner being served at the buffet. She found an empty table near the back, hoping to observe the festivities without drawing attention. The social hierarchies were on full display. The popular kids claimed the tables closest to the dance floor, while the less prominent students gravitated toward the periphery. Madison Pierce, of course, held court at the center table, her rose gold gown glittering as she posed for photos with her date, Trevor Hamilton, whose family owned the largest law firm in the county. Jessica Chun wore a sleek black dress that complemented her perfectly straightened hair, while Amber Rodriguez had chosen a dramatic red gown that matched her bold personality. They moved through the crowd like royalty, air-kissing friends and making grand gestures that ensured all eyes remained on them. "Sophia," a familiar voice called out. She turned to see Marcus Thompson, a fellow member of the debate team, approaching with a genuine smile. He was tall and lanky, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and wore a rented tuxedo that fit him reasonably well. "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," Sophia admitted, grateful for a friendly face. "Everything's so elaborate." Marcus laughed, gesturing at the ice sculptures. "My mom calls it conspicuous consumption. She's a sociology professor at the State University. Want to grab some food?" The shrimp cocktail is apparently flown in from Maine. They walked to the buffet together, making small talk about their upcoming debate tournament and the history paper that was due Monday. For a moment, Sophia felt normal, just a teenager at a school dance, complaining about homework and laughing at her friends' jokes about the pretentious ice swan centerpiece. The moment shattered when Madison's voice cut through the music. "Oh, my God, Jessica, look at that dress," Madison said loudly, her voice carrying across the room. "It's so quaint, very thrift store chic." Sophia's cheeks burned, but she continued serving herself salad, determined not to react. Marcus shot her a sympathetic look, but she shook her head slightly. She'd learned that responding only made things worse. "I think it's actually kind of pretty," Trevor said, surprising everyone. "The color brings out her eyes." Madison's smile turned razor sharp. "Trevor, you're so sweet. Always looking for the good in people, even when they're clearly out of their league." The group laughed, but it was forced, uncomfortable. Even some of Madison's followers seemed to sense she was crossing a line. Sophia set down her plate and walked back to her table, her appetite gone. The evening progressed with painful predictability. Madison and her friends danced with their dates, posed for endless photos, and made sure everyone knew they were the one stars of the show. Sophia tried to enjoy herself, dancing with Marcus to a few slow songs and talking with some of the debate team members who joined their table. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, studied like a specimen under a microscope. At 10:30, the DJ announced the final dance of the evening. Couples filled the floor for a romantic ballad, and even some of the wallflowers found partners. Sophia stood to visit the restroom, needing a moment away from the crowd and the constant tension. The ladies' room was a marble palace with gilded mirrors and soft lighting that made everyone look like they were glowing. Sophia touched up her lipstick and checked her reflection, trying to convince herself that she belonged here just as much as anyone else. She was washing her hands when Madison, Jessica, and Amber entered, their heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown to Kaufa. Disaster. Having fun at your first and last Riverside formal? Madison asked, her tone deceptively casual as she applied fresh lipstick in the mirror. It's been lovely, Sophia replied carefully, reaching for a paper towel. That's wonderful to hear. Jessica chimed in, her voice saccharine. We were just wondering, did you make that dress yourself? It has such a homemade quality. Sophia's jaw tightened. My mother and I bought it together. How sweet, Amber added, examining her nails. Family bonding over bargain shopping, very authentic. Madison turned to face Sophia directly, her ice blue eyes glittering with malice. You know, I've been thinking about what you said that first day about finding your place here. I think we need to help you understand exactly where that place is. Warning bells rang in Sophia's head. The bathroom suddenly felt smaller, the marble walls closing in. She moved toward the door, but Jessica casually stepped in front of it. We're not done talking, Madison said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You see, Riverside Academy has traditions, standards, and sometimes, when someone doesn't understand those standards, we have to make them crystal clear. I haven't done anything to you, Sophia said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. You exist, Madison replied simply. You walk through our halls, sit in our classrooms, and pretend you belong here. But you don't. You're a charity case, a mistake, a reminder of everything this school is trying to rise above. The words hit Sophia like physical blows, but she forced herself to stand straight. I earned my place here. Madison laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Earned? You mean your dead daddy's service bought your way in? How noble, how tragic, how completely irrelevant to the rest of us. The mention of her father sent white-hot rage through Sophia's veins, but she clenched her fists and said nothing. Her martial arts training had taught her to control her emotions, to never fight in anger. Cat got your tongue? Amber taunted. Or are you finally realizing you don't belong? Madison stepped closer, her expensive perfume overwhelming. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk back out there, thank everyone for a lovely evening, and never show your face at another Riverside social event. You'll finish the school year quietly, get your little scholarship diploma, and disappear to whatever community college will take you. And if you don't... She let the threat hang in the air, but Sophia could see the calculation in her eyes. This wasn't just about social hierarchy, it was about power, about proving that Madison Pierce could destroy anyone who dared to challenge her reign. If I don't? Sophia asked quietly. Madison's smile was pure venom. Then we'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. The scholarship girl who thought she could play with the big kids. The charity case who forgot her place. The nobody who thought she was somebody. The bathroom door opened, and several other girls entered, chattering about the dance and checking their makeup. Madison's demeanor shifted instantly, her cruel smile transforming into a picture of innocence. Oh, hi, girls, she said brightly. We were just telling Sophia how gorgeous her dress looks. Weren't we, Sophia? Sophia stared at her for a long moment, seeing the challenge in Madison's eyes. This was the moment: submit or fight. Accept her place at the bottom of the social hierarchy or risk everything by standing up to the most powerful girl in school. Yes, Sophia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. Madison's triumph was written across her face. You're so welcome. Now shall we head back? I believe they're about to announce the winter formal queen. They walked back into the ballroom together, but Sophia felt like she was walking to her execution. The final dance was ending, and students were gathering around the small stage, where Principal Matthews stood with an elegant crown on a velvet pillow. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "it's time to crown our winter formal queen. This year's winner by a landslide is Madison Pierce." The crowd erupted in applause as Madison glided toward the stage, her rose gold gown trailing behind her like liquid metal. She accepted the crown with gracious tears, giving a perfectly rehearsed speech about gratitude and school spirit. Sophia stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the girl who just threatened to destroy her life bask in the adoration of their classmates. The injustice of it all, the casual cruelty, the abuse of power, the complete lack of consequences made her stomach turn. Pretty disgusting, isn't it? Marcus appeared beside her, his expression grim. "I heard them talking earlier. They've been planning this for weeks." "Planning what?" Sophia asked, though she dreaded the answer. "I don't know exactly, but Madison's been telling people that tonight is when the scholarship situation gets resolved, whatever that means." As if summoned by their conversation, Madison stepped down from the stage, crown glittering on her head, and began walking directly toward them. Her friends flanked her, their faces alight with anticipation. "Sophia!" Madison called out sweetly, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I have a special announcement to make." The crowd turned to look, sensing drama. Phones appeared, ready to capture whatever was about to happen. Sophia felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on her, the pressure of their expectations and judgments. Madison stopped just a few feet away, her smile radiant and terrible. "I wanted to personally thank you for coming tonight. I know it must have been challenging to find something appropriate to wear on such a limited budget." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some students looked uncomfortable, others leaned in with interest. The phones kept recording. "But I think," Madison continued, her voice carrying across the ballroom, "that we should help you understand why certain standards exist. Why do some people belong here and others don't?" She nodded to Jessica and Amber, who stepped forward with predatory smiles. Before Sophia could react, Jessica grabbed the delicate fabric of her dress at the shoulder while Amber seized the "This is what happens," Madison announced, "when you don't know your place." They pulled in opposite directions, and the emerald dress, beautiful, carefully chosen, paid for with her mother's hard-earned savings tore apart with a sound like thunder. The fabric split from shoulder to waist, leaving Sophia standing in the center of the ballroom in her simple slip, pieces of green silk scattered around her feet like fallen leaves. The crowd gasped. Camera phones flashed. Someone laughed, a high, nervous sound that cut through the sudden silence. Sophia stood frozen, humiliation washing over her in waves. This was worse than anything she'd imagined, worse than all the small cruelties and subtle exclusions. This was public destruction, a complete annihilation of her dignity in front of everyone who mattered at Riverside Academy. Madison's voice cut through the silence, sweet as poison. "Maybe now you'll understand where you really belong." But as Sophia looked up, meeting Madison's triumphant gaze, something shifted inside her. The humiliation was still there, burning in her chest like acid, but beneath it, another feeling was rising, one that had been building for weeks, months, years of being told she didn't belong, didn't matter, didn't deserve respect. It was the feeling Coach Rivera had warned her about, the fire that every Muay Thai fighter had to learn to control. The moment when discipline meets rage, when technique meets fury, when the careful boundaries between warrior and weapon begin to blur. Sophia's hands slowly curled into fists at her sides, her breathing deepening as muscle memory took over. The ballroom, the crowd, the cameras, all of it faded into background noise as she focused on Madison's face, on the cruel satisfaction in those ice blue eyes. "You made a mistake," Sophia said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness. "Madison, laughed, drunk on her victory. "Oh really? And what's that?" Sophia's response was lost in the sudden explosion of movement that followed, but those closest to her swore they heard her whisper, "You should have left my dress alone." Time seemed to slow as Sophia's training took over. 3 years of rigorous Muay Thai discipline flooded through her muscle memory, the countless hours spent perfecting her stance, the meditation sessions that taught her to find calm in chaos, the sparring matches that had forged her into a weapon she'd promised never to use outside the gym. Madison was still laughing when Sophia moved. The first strike was a lightning-fast jab that caught Madison square in the solar plexus. The winter formal queen doubled over, her crown tumbling to the marble floor with a crystalline crash that echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom. Her perfectly curled hair fell across her face as she gasped for air, her rose-gold gown suddenly looking tarnished under the harsh light of reality. What the Jessica started to say, but her words were cut short as Sophia's elbow connected with her ribs in a classic Sakti move. The impact lifted Jessica off her feet, sending her stumbling backward into a nearby ice sculpture. She hit the frozen swan with a sickening thud, both girl and sculpture crashing to the ground in a shower of ice and designer fabric. Amber screamed and charged forward, her red dress billowing like a battle flag, but Sophia was already in motion. She pivoted on her left foot, her right leg sweeping up in a devastating teep kick that caught Amber in the chest. The force sent her flying backward across 3 tables, flowers and champagne glasses exploding around her as she skidded across the white silk tablecloths before coming to rest in a tangled heap near the jazz quartet. The entire sequence lasted less than 10 seconds. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Students screamed and scattered, some pulling out phones to record while others simply stood frozen in shock. The elderly chaperones shouted for order, but their voices were lost in the pandemonium. Principal Matthews rushed toward the scene, his face pale with horror. Sophia stood in the center of it all, her chest rising and falling steadily, pieces of her torn dress still clinging to her frame like battle scars. She looked down at Madison, who was still struggling to breathe, clutching her stomach with perfectly manicured nails that were now chipped and broken. "You ... all quotes," Madison wheezed, her voice barely audible. "You're insane ... No," Sophia replied calmly, her voice carrying across the ballroom with startling clarity. "I'm just tired of being told where I belong." Trevor Hamilton, Madison's date, stepped forward with his hands raised. He was bigger than Sophia, a linebacker on the varsity football team, but something in her stance, the perfect balance, the controlled breathing, the predatory stillness made him hesitate. "Hey, let's all just calm down," he said nervously. "This has gone far enough." Sophia's eyes never left his face. "Has it? Your girlfriend just humiliated me in front of 200 people, destroyed something my mother worked extra shifts to buy, and told me I don't deserve to exist in the same space as you, but I'm the one who needs to calm down?" The crowd murmured, phones capturing every word. Some students were live streaming to social media, and Sophia could see the shock in their faces as they realized they were witnessing something unprecedented, the complete destruction of Riverside Academy's social order. "You don't understand," Trevor continued, though his voice lacked conviction. "Madison didn't mean. She meant every word," Sophia interrupted. "And so do I." Madison struggled to her feet, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. Her perfect makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, and her rose-gold gown was wrinkled and stained. The crown lay forgotten at her feet, its jewels scattered across the marble floor like fallen stars. "You think this changes anything?" Madison snarled, though she kept her distance. "You think beating us up makes you one of us? You're still nothing. Still nobody." Still, Sophia's laugh cut her off, a sound unlike anything Madison had ever heard from the quiet scholarship girl. It was confident, dangerous, completely unafraid. "You're right," Sophia said, stepping closer. I'm not one of you. I'm something. You could never be someone who earned everything she has. Someone who doesn't need to tear others down to feel powerful. Someone who knows exactly who she is. The crowd pressed closer, sensing the shift in power. Madison Pierce, who had ruled Riverside Academy for 3 years, was backing away from a girl she dismissed as insignificant. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. "This isn't over," Madison whispered, but her threat sounded hollow. "Yes, it is," Sophia replied simply. "It's been over since the moment you decided I was beneath you. You just didn't know it yet." Principal Matthews finally reached them, flanked by security guards and several teachers. His face was flushed with exertion and embarrassment. This was exactly the kind of incident that could destroy a prestigious school's reputation. "Miss Martinez," he shouted, "what is the meaning of this violence?" Before Sophia could answer, Marcus stepped forward, his phone in his hand. "Principal Matthews, I have the entire incident recorded. Madison Pierce and her friends destroyed Sophia's dress in front of everyone, humiliated her publicly, and physically assaulted her first. Sophia was defending herself." "That's not," Madison started to protest, but her voice cracked. "I have it all on video," Marcus continued, his voice steady. "The bathroom conversation, the dress destruction, everything. And I'm not the only one." He gestured to the crowd of students, many of whom were nodding and holding up their own phones. Principal Matthews looked around the ballroom at the destroyed ice sculpture, the overturned tables, the 3 girls who had been effortlessly defeated by someone they'd underestimated. His political instincts kicked in immediately. This was damage control time. "Everyone, please return to your tables," he announced. "The evening is concluded. Students, please collect your belongings and proceed to the exits in an orderly fashion." But nobody moved. They were too fascinated by the scene unfolding before them, the complete reversal of everything they thought they knew about power and status at Riverside Academy. Jessica finally struggled to her feet, ice crystals still clinging to her black dress. She looked at Sophia with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "Nevada," Sophia answered simply. "A little gym where they teach you that respect isn't given, it's earned." Amber was helped up by several students, her red dress torn and stained. She wouldn't meet Sophia's eyes, the fight completely gone out of her. The girl who had been Madison's most loyal enforcer now looked like what she really was, a follower who had picked the wrong leader. The crowd began to thin as students reluctantly headed for the exits, but their conversations were animated. Sophia could hear fragments. "Did you see that kick? Madison got destroyed. I knew there was something different about the new girl." Madison made one last desperate attempt to salvage her dignity. "You're expelled," she said, her voice shaking. "My mother is on the board." "You'll never, your mother," Sophia interrupted, "just watched her daughter publicly humiliate and assault another student at a school function, on camera, in front of witnesses. Good luck explaining that to the board." The truth of it hit Madison like a physical blow. Her face went white as she realized the implications. This wasn't just a fight, it was a scandal that would follow her family for years. The girl she'd dismissed as irrelevant had just destroyed everything she'd built. As the last students filed out, Sophia stood alone in the ruined ballroom. Her torn dress fluttered around her like battle flags, and pieces of Madison's crown glittered at her feet. She looked around at the overturned tables, the shattered ice sculpture, the scattered rose petals, all evidence of the moment when everything changed. Marcus approached her carefully. "Sophia, are you okay?" She turned to him, and he was surprised to see tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief. For the first time in years, she had stood up for herself completely, held nothing back, and won. "I'm better than okay," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I'm free." Behind them, Madison Pierce, former winter formal queen, former ruler of Riverside Academy, former untouchable princess, stumbled toward the exit with her defeated friends. Her reign was over, her social status destroyed as completely as Sophia's dress had been. But unlike the dress, Madison's fall from grace couldn't be repaired with needle and thread. The video footage was already spreading across social media, the story taking on a life of its own. By morning, everyone in Connecticut would know what happened when Madison Pierce tried to destroy the wrong girl. As Sophia walked toward the exit, she caught her reflection in one of the ballroom's ornate mirrors. She looked different, not just because of the torn dress or the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, but because something fundamental had shifted. The girl who had entered the formal invisible and afraid was gone forever. In her place stood someone new, someone who had faced her demons and won, someone who would never again let others define her worth, someone who understood that true power didn't come from tearing others down, but from lifting yourself up. The art of 8 limbs had taught her to fight, but this moment had taught her something more valuable: how to be herself, completely and unapologetically, no matter what anyone else thought. Tomorrow would bring consequences, conversations, and probably a media storm. But tonight, Sophia Martinez had won something more valuable than any crown. She had won herself back. The first rays of dawn filtered through Sophia's bedroom window as her phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the events at the winter formal over and over. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Madison's crown hitting the marble floor, heard the gasp of the crowd, felt the satisfying impact of her strikes connecting with their targets. She reached for her phone and immediately understood why it hadn't stopped ringing. The notification screen was flooded with messages, missed calls, and social media alerts. The video of the ballroom confrontation had gone viral overnight, spreading far beyond Riverside Academy's social circles. Scholarship girl destroys bullies. AT prep school dance. Read one headline that Marcus had forwarded to her. The accompanying video had already been viewed over 2 million times, with comments pouring in from around the world. Oh my God, she ended them. That's what happens when you mess with the wrong one. Madison Pierce thought she was untouchable. Those Muay Thai kicks were clean. But mixed in with the support were darker comments, ones that made Sophia's stomach churn. Some people called her violent, dangerous, a thug who didn't belong in civilized society. Others questioned whether someone on scholarship should be allowed to attend a prestigious school if they were going to assault other students. Her mother knocked softly on the door before entering with a cup of coffee and a worried expression. Maria Martinez had received her own flood of calls from the school, from reporters, from relatives who'd seen the videos online. "Mia," her mother said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed, "we need to talk about what happened." Sophia sat up, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Mom, I know how it looks, but it looks like my daughter stood up for herself after months of harassment," Maria interrupted firmly. "I've watched the videos, Sophia, all of them, including the ones from the bathroom that some girl posted on TikTok." Sophia's eyes widened. She hadn't known about bathroom footage. "Brittany Walsh was in one of the stalls," her mother continued. "She recorded Madison threatening you, talking about your father, everything. The whole conversation is online now." Relief flooded through Sophia. She'd been prepared to face consequences for her actions, but knowing that the full context was available changed everything. "Principal Matthews called," Maria said. "There's going to be a disciplinary hearing on Monday. The Pierce family is demanding your expulsion, but—" She smiled grimly. "Apparently, the school board is more concerned about the lawsuit they're facing from us." "Lawsuit?" "Sweetheart, what those girls did to you was assault, battery, and harassment. The school allowed it to happen under their supervision. Our lawyer, yes, we have a lawyer now, says we have an excellent case." Before Sophia could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize with a Nevada area code. Her heart skipped as she answered. "Sophia? This is Coach Rivera." Her former Muay Thai instructor's voice brought tears to her eyes. She'd left Nevada abruptly when her mother's job transferred, never getting to say goodbye properly to the man who'd become like a second father to her. "Coach, how did you?" "The whole world's seen the video, Mia," he said with a chuckle. "I've had reporters calling my gym all morning, asking about the girl who used perfect Muay Thai technique at some fancy school dance. I told them I couldn't comment, but between you and me ... I've never been prouder." "I broke my promise," Sophia said, her voice cracking. "I said I'd never use the training outside the gym. You defended yourself against multiple attackers who had already assaulted you," Coach Rivera replied firmly. "You showed restraint. You could have done much worse damage, but you controlled yourself. That's exactly what I taught you." They talked for 20 minutes, Coach Rivera filling her in on the gym's latest tournaments and promising to visit Connecticut soon. The conversation reminded Sophia of who she really was beneath all the chaos. Not a violent person, but someone who'd been pushed to her absolute limit and had finally pushed back. Monday morning at Riverside Academy was unlike anything in the school's 150-year history. News vans lined the circular drive, reporters shoving microphones at anyone in a uniform, and protesters with signs reading, "Justice for Sophia" and "Stop Prep School Bullying" gathered near the main entrance. Inside, the hallways buzzed with an energy that was part excitement, part fear. Students who had never spoken to Sophia before nodded respectfully as she passed, while others whispered and pointed. The social hierarchy that had seemed carved in stone was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Madison Pierce was nowhere to be seen. Rumors swirled that her family had hired a crisis management firm and were considering transferring her to a boarding school in Switzerland. Jessica Chun walked the halls like a ghost, her usual confidence replaced by nervous glances and hunched shoulders. Amber Rodriguez had reportedly been pulled out of school entirely by her parents. The disciplinary hearing was held in the main conference room, a mahogany-paneled chamber usually reserved for board meetings and donor galas. Sophia sat between her mother and their lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Torres who specialized in education law and civil rights cases. Across the polished table sat the Pierce family with their legal team, 5 lawyers in expensive suits who looked like they were preparing for a federal case rather than a school disciplinary hearing. Madison kept her eyes down, her usual perfect posture replaced by a defeated slumped. Principal Matthews opened the proceedings nervously, clearly out of his depth. The school board members flanked him, their faces grave as they tried to navigate the media circus that had engulfed their institution. "We're here to address the incident that occurred at the winter formal," Matthews began. "The alleged assault by Miss Martinez on 3 fellow students." "Alleged?" Catherine Torres interrupted smoothly. "Principal Matthews, there's nothing alleged about what happened. It's all on video. The question is whether the school is going to continue to protect the perpetrators of months of harassment and assault, or finally take responsibility for the toxic environment they've allowed to flourish." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "We have documentation of every incident over the past 2 months. The vandalized locker, the destroyed lunch, the anonymous threatening notes, the public humiliation. All of it was ignored by the school administration despite multiple reports." The Pierce family's lead lawyer, a distinguished man with silver hair, leaned forward. "Miss Martinez used excessive force against 3 unarmed students. She has clearly been trained in combat sports and used that training to inflict serious injuries." "Serious injuries?" Catherine shot back. "Madison Pierce has a bruised solar plexus. Jessica Chun has a sore rib. Amber Rodriguez has a bruised chest. Meanwhile, my client was sexually assaulted. Yes, forcibly removing someone's clothing is sexual assault in front of 200 witnesses after months of targeted harassment." The room fell silent. Even the Pierce family's lawyers looked uncomfortable as they realized how their client's actions looked under legal scrutiny. Board member Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a former federal judge, spoke for the first time. "Mr. Matthews, can you explain to me how this harassment was allowed to continue for months without intervention?" Matthews squirmed in his seat. The complaints were often he said, she said situations, without clear evidence. There are dozens of social media posts from Madison Pierce and her friends mocking Miss Martinez. Dr. Warren continued icily. Screenshots of group chats planning pranks against the scholarship student. Text messages discussing how to put her in her place. This isn't he said, she said. This is a pattern of harassment that the school administration chose to ignore. The hearing continued for 3 hours with witness statements, video evidence, and expert testimony about the psychological effects of prolonged bullying. Through it all, Sophia remained calm, answering questions clearly and honestly when asked. To speak, the breakthrough came when Marcus Thompson was called to testify. He'd compiled a comprehensive digital archive of every social media post, text message, and recorded conversation related to the harassment campaign against Sophia. "Madison Pierce organized this from day one," he said, connecting his laptop to the room's projection system. "Look at this group chat from Sophia's first week." The messages appeared on the large screen, and the room collectively gasped. The planning was methodical, cruel, and extensive. Madison had researched Sophia's background, identified her vulnerabilities, and systematically targeted them. She knew about Sophia's father's military service, Marcus continued. She knew about the scholarship. She even found out about the Muay Thai training from old social media posts and planned to use it against her if Sophia ever fought back. The Pierce family's case collapsed in real time. What they'd tried to frame as an unprovoked assault was revealed to be the inevitable conclusion of a calculated harassment campaign that had gone on for months. Dr. Warren called for a recess, and when the hearing reconvened an hour later, the school board's decision was swift and decisive. Madison Pierce, Jessica Chun, and Amber Rodriguez are hereby expelled from Riverside Academy, Dr. Warren announced. Their behavior represents everything this institution stands against. Miss Martinez, while we cannot condone violence, we recognize that you were defending yourself against assault after exhausting all other avenues for relief. She turned to Principal Matthews. As for the administration's failure to protect one of our students, that will be addressed separately. This hearing is concluded. The aftermath was swift and complete. The Pierce family's threats of lawsuits evaporated when their own legal team advised them that pursuing the matter would only result in more damaging evidence becoming public. Madison Pierce transferred to a private school in California, her social media accounts deleted, her reign at Riverside Academy erased as if it had never existed. The story became a case study in schools across the country about the dangers of unchecked bullying and the importance of protecting vulnerable students. Sophia found herself reluctantly famous, invited to speak at anti-bullying conferences, and featured in documentaries about standing up to harassment. But the real change was quieter, more personal. At Riverside Academy, the social hierarchy that had seemed unbreakable crumbled completely. Students who had never spoken before formed new friendships across old boundaries. The culture of exclusivity and cruelty that had defined the school for generations began to transform into something healthier. Sophia started a martial arts club that became one of the most popular activities on campus. She taught self-defense, but emphasized the mental discipline and confidence that came with training. The shy, invisible girl who had arrived at Riverside Academy in September was gone forever, replaced by someone who knew exactly who she was and what she stood for. On a warm spring afternoon, as she led the martial arts club through basic Muay Thai forms on the same lawn where she'd once felt so out of place, Sophia reflected on how completely her world had changed. She wore the emerald green dress again, carefully repaired by her mother's skillful hands, to the spring formal, where she was elected to the student council by a landslide. The girl who had been told she didn't belong had not only found her place but had changed the very definition of what belonging meant at Riverside Academy. And in the end, that was a victory more complete than any she could have achieved in the ring. 6 months after the winter formal incident, Riverside Academy had become an entirely different place. The toxic social hierarchies that had once dominated student life were replaced by a more inclusive atmosphere where academic achievement and character mattered more than family wealth or social connections. But for Sofia Martinez, the most dramatic changes were yet to come. It was a humid Tuesday in late May when everything shifted again. Sofia was in the middle of teaching a self-defense workshop to a group of freshman girls when Marcus burst into the gymnasium, his laptop clutched against his chest and his face pale with excitement. "Sofia, you need to see this," he said, his voice barely controlled. "I've been digging deeper into Madison's social media history for that documentary crew, and I found something incredible." The freshman girls gathered around as Marcus opened his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Remember how Madison seemed to know so much about your background? Your father's military service, your scholarship details, even your Muay Thai training." Sofia nodded, a chill running down her spine. She'd always wondered how Madison had accessed such personal information. "I traced her digital footprint back 3 years, Marcus continued, pulling up a series of screenshots. "Look at this." The screen showed an encrypted messaging app with conversations between Madison and someone identified only as Phoenix_Hunter. The messages were dated 2 weeks before Sofia's first day at Riverside Academy. "Target confirmed, Sofia Martinez. Scholarship student, father Kia military, mother Maria Martinez, defense contractor. Subject has martial arts training, Muay Thai, Nevada. Recommends standard isolation protocol followed by public humiliation. Payment upon completion." Sofia's blood ran cold. Payment? She was hired to target me? Marcus scrolled through more messages, his face grim. "It gets worse. Look at this." More conversations appeared, showing detailed psychological profiles, strategic planning sessions, and progress reports on Sofia's emotional state. It wasn't just bullying, it was a coordinated psychological warfare campaign. But why? One of the freshman girls asked, her voice barely a whisper. Who would pay someone to destroy a random student? Marcus clicked to another window, showing a corporate database he'd somehow accessed. That's where it gets really interesting. Phoenix_Hunter's real name is Victoria Ashworth. She runs something called Ashworth Strategic Consulting, which specializes in reputation management and competitive intelligence for defense contractors. Sofia's mother worked for Meridian Defense Solutions, one of the largest military contractors in the country. The pieces began falling into place with terrifying clarity. "Your mom was up for a major promotion last year, right?" Marcus asked. "Regional director for the entire East Coast Division?" "Yes, but she didn't get it," Sofia replied slowly. "They said there were concerns about her family stability due to all our moves." Marcus pulled up another document. The person who got that promotion instead was James Chun, Jessica's father. And guess who his wife's company hired 3 months before your mom's interview? Ashworth Strategic Consulting. The gymnasium fell silent except for the sound of the air conditioning humming overhead. Sofia sank onto a nearby bench, the magnitude of the conspiracy washing over her. Everything that had happened at Riverside Academy, the systematic harassment, the social isolation, Madison's cruel campaign, had all been orchestrated to sabotage her mother's career. "This is insane," whispered Emma Rodriguez, one of the freshmen, who'd become Sofia's most dedicated student. "They destroyed your life to help someone get a job?" "They tried to destroy my life," Sofia corrected, her voice growing stronger. "But they failed." Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from her mother. "Mia, I need you to come home immediately. Don't talk to anyone else first." The drive home was tense and silent. Maria Martinez had received her own revelation that morning. Call from an FBI agent investigating corporate espionage within the defense contracting industry. Apparently, Marcus wasn't the only one who'd been digging into suspicious activities. At home, 2 federal agents sat in their living room, their badges and stern expressions making the small space feel even more cramped. Agent Sarah Collins, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and sharp eyes, gestured for Sophia to sit down. "Miss Martinez, we understand you've uncovered some disturbing information about the harassment you experienced at school," Agent Collins began. "We need to know everything you've learned." For the next 2 hours, Sophia and Marcus, who had been called to join them, laid out their entire digital investigation. The agents took notes, asked probing questions, and confirmed details that made the scope of the conspiracy even more shocking. "The Chun family isn't the only one involved," Agent Collins revealed. "We've been tracking Ashworth Strategic Consulting for 18 months. They've orchestrated similar campaigns against the children of at least 12 other defense contractor employees across 6 states. 12 other kids went through what I did?" Sophia asked, her voice tight with anger. Agent Collins nodded grimly. "Children of employees who were competing for promotions, trying to expose company misconduct, or simply viewed as threats to their clients' interests. The strategy is always the same: psychological pressure on the family through attacks on the most vulnerable member." The revelation hit Sophia like a physical blow. She thought about 12 other teenagers in 12 other schools, facing the same systematic cruelty she'd endured. How many had fought back? How many had been broken by it? "We need your help," Agent Collins continued. "Your case is the first, where the target not only survived the psychological campaign, but generated enough public attention to expose the operation. The video evidence, the digital trail Marcus uncovered, it's exactly what we need to bring down the entire network." Over the following weeks, Sophia found herself at the center of a federal investigation that made international headlines. The story had everything: corporate espionage, psychological warfare, wealthy families abusing their power, and a teenage girl who'd fought back against impossible odds. The trial began in September, just as Sophia started her senior year at Riverside Academy. She testified for 3 days, walking the jury through every detail of her experience. The defense tried to paint her as a violent student who'd overreacted to normal teenage conflict, but the digital evidence was overwhelming. Madison Pierce was called as a witness, and Sophia barely recognized the girl who took the stand. Gone was the confident queen bee who'd ruled Riverside Academy. In her place sat a hollow-eyed teenager who'd been used as a weapon by adults who cared nothing for the damage they caused. "I thought it was just a game," Madison testified, her voice barely audible. "Mrs. Ashworth made it sound like we were just helping my family's business." She said Sophia's mother was trying to steal jobs from more deserving people. "Did you know Miss Martinez's father had died in military service?" the prosecutor asked. Madison's composure cracked. "No, Mrs. Ashworth told me to research her background, but she never. I didn't know he was dead when I said those things about him." For the first time since the winter formal, Sophia felt something other than anger toward her former tormentor. Madison had been manipulated too, used by adults who understood exactly how to weaponize teenage insecurity and social pressure. The verdicts came in November. Victoria Ashworth was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for conspiracy, racketeering, and violation of anti-surveillance laws. James Chun lost his position at Meridian Defense Solutions and faced civil penalties that would bankrupt his family. The Ashworth Strategic Consulting firm was dissolved, its assets seized to provide restitution to the victims. Most importantly, the investigation led to sweeping reforms in the defense contracting industry. New protocols were established to prevent the targeting of employees' families, and several other corporate espionage firms were shut down. But for Sophia, the real victory was more personal. Her mother was not only promoted to regional director, but was also recruited by a new company that valued her integrity and expertise. The family could finally stop moving, finally put down roots, finally have the stability they'd been seeking. For years, on graduation day, Sophia stood at the podium as valedictorian of her class, not because of her ordeal, but because she genuinely earned the highest GPA in Riverside Academy's history. Her speech focused not on the events that had made her famous, but on the importance of standing up for others who couldn't stand up for themselves. "I learned this year that evil doesn't always look like a monster," she told the gathered crowd of families and graduates. "Sometimes it looks like a normal person making calculations about other people's pain. The only way to fight that kind of evil is to refuse to be silent when we see it happening." In the audience, Marcus beamed with pride. He'd been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship, his investigative skills having caught the attention of cybersecurity firms across the country. Emma Rodriguez and the other students Sophia had taught sat with their families, wearing small martial arts pins on their graduation, caps a symbol of the confidence and strength they'd learned from their unlikely teacher. Coach Rivera had flown in from Nevada for the ceremony, sitting next to Maria Martinez and wiping away tears as his former student spoke about using strength to protect others rather than dominate them. After the ceremony, he pulled Sophia aside with an offer that would shape her next chapter. "I'm opening a new gym in Connecticut," he said, "specifically for teaching self-defense to young people who've been bullied or abused. I want you to be my partner, my co-instructor. You've proven that martial arts isn't just about fighting. It's about finding the courage to stand up for what's right." That autumn, as Sophia began her freshman year at Yale University on a full scholarship, she also began teaching at the Phoenix Rising Self-Defense Academy, named for the mythical bird that rises from its own ashes, stronger than before. The gym became a sanctuary for teenagers from across Connecticut who needed to learn not just how to defend themselves physically, but how to reclaim their sense of self-worth. The girl who had arrived at Riverside Academy, invisible and afraid, had become a beacon of hope for others facing their own battles. And while the scars from her experience would never fully fade, Sophia had learned something invaluable, that sometimes the greatest victories come not from avoiding conflict, but from facing it head-on with courage, integrity, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. As she looked back on the journey that had brought her to this point, Sophia realized that Madison Pierce and her conspirators had made one critical miscalculation. They'd assumed that breaking a person would make them weaker. Instead, they'd discovered that some people, when pushed to their breaking point, don't break at all. They transform into something stronger than anyone could have imagined. 2 years had passed since the winter formal that changed everything, and Sophia Martinez was now a sophomore at Yale University, majoring in international relations with a focus on corporate ethics. Her dorm room walls were covered with photos from the Phoenix Rising Self-Defense Academy, newspaper clippings about the corporate espionage trial, and letters from students across the country who'd found courage through her story. But on this particular October morning, as autumn leaves painted the New Haven campus in brilliant reds and golds, Sophia received a call that would pull her back into a world she thought she'd left behind. "Sophia, this is Detective Amanda Rodriguez from the Greenwich Police Department. I'm sorry to bother you, but we have a situation involving Madison Pierce, and we believe you might be able to help." Sophia's blood chilled. She hadn't spoken to Madison since the trial, when her former tormentor had testified about being manipulated by the corporate espionage ring. According to news reports, Madison had transferred to a small liberal arts college in Oregon, keeping a low profile while trying to rebuild her life. What kind of situation Sophia asked, setting down her constitutional law textbook. She's in our station right now, asking specifically for you. She says there's something about the Ashworth case that she never told the FBI, something that could prevent other kids from going through what you both experienced. An hour later, Sophia sat in the sterile conference room at the Greenwich Police Department, facing the girl who had once torn her dress apart in front of 200 classmates. Madison looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, and none of the polished confidence that had once defined her. Her expensive designer clothes had been replaced by a simple sweater and jeans that looked like they came from a department store. "Thank you for coming," Madison said quietly, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them on the metal table. "I know you have every reason to hate me." "I don't hate you," Sophia replied honestly. "I understand now that you were being used. Just like I was." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "That's what makes this so much harder. You've been kind to me when I deserve nothing but your anger." She took a shaky breath. "There's something I never told the FBI. Something Victoria Ashworth made me promise to keep secret, even after everything came out." Detective Rodriguez leaned forward, her pen poised over a notepad. "What kind of secret?" "There's another operation," Madison whispered. "Bigger than what happened to our families. Ashworth didn't just target defense contractor employees. She was building something called Project Mirror, a nationwide network to systematically destroy the children of anyone who threatened certain corporate interests." The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Sophia felt a familiar chill, the same one she'd experienced when Marcus first showed her the encrypted messages. Madison continued, her voice gaining strength. "Environmental lawyers whose kids were suddenly facing severe cyberbullying. Whistleblowers whose teenagers were being sexually harassed at school. FDA investigators whose children were being recruited into dangerous gangs. All of it orchestrated by a network of consulting firms working together." "How do you know this?" Detective Rodriguez asked. "Because I was supposed to be their regional recruiter," Madison said, her voice cracking. "After the trial, after Victoria went to prison, someone else contacted me. They said my success with Sophia proved I had the skills they needed to identify and recruit other students who could be turned into weapons against their own classmates." Sophia's hands clenched into fists. "You said no, right?" Madison nodded vigorously. "Of course I said no. But that's when they started threatening me. My family lost everything because of the trial. Dad's company went bankrupt. Mom's social standing was destroyed. We had to sell our house. These people said they could make it all disappear, give us our old life back if I just helped them with one more operation." "What operation?" Sophia asked, though she dreaded the answer. Madison pulled out her phone with shaking hands, showing them a series of text messages. "There's a girl named Aria Santos in Denver. Her mother is Dr. Alina Santos, the epidemiologist who's been investigating why certain pharmaceutical companies are hiding data about adverse reactions in clinical trials. They want me to befriend Aria, gain her trust, then systematically destroy her mental health to pressure her mother into dropping the investigation." The messages were chillingly clinical, describing Aria Santos as if she were a military target, rather than a 17-year-old girl. They included detailed psychological profiles, family financial information, and even medical records that had clearly been obtained illegally. "This has to stop," Sophia said, her voice filled with quiet fury. "How many other kids are they targeting right now?" Madison scrolled through more messages. "At least 15 that I know of. Children of environmental lawyers in California, labor organizers in Michigan, consumer advocates in Texas. They've turned high school social dynamics into a weapon for corporate interests." Detective Rodriguez was already making calls, bringing in federal agents who specialized in organized crime and corporate conspiracy cases. Within hours, the small conference room was filled with FBI agents, prosecutors, and cybersecurity experts who recognized that they were looking at something unprecedented: the systematic weaponization of teenage social cruelty for corporate gain. Agent Sarah Collins, who had worked on the original Ashworth case, arrived that evening with a team of specialists. "Madison, I need you to understand something. If what you're telling us is true, you're not just a witness anymore. You're an undercover asset in an active federal investigation." The plan they developed was ambitious and dangerous. Madison would pretend to accept the recruitment offer, allowing the FBI to monitor the entire network while building a case that could dismantle the operation permanently. But it meant she would have to appear to befriend Arias Santos while secretly working to protect her. "I can't do this alone," Madison said after the agents explained the operation. "If they suspect I'm working with law enforcement, they'll disappear and start over somewhere else. And Aria, she never trusts me, especially if she finds out who I am." Sophia had been quiet throughout the planning session, but now she spoke up. "You won't be alone. I'm going with you." Agent Collins shook her head immediately. "Absolutely not. You're a civilian, and more importantly, you're recognizable. Your face has been on magazine covers and documentary films. That's exactly why." "It will work," Sophia insisted. "If Madison Pierce shows up in Denver with Sophia Martinez, everyone will assume it's some kind of redemption story. The media loves the narrative of former enemies becoming allies. It's the perfect cover." The debate continued for hours, but eventually, the agents agreed that Sophia's presence would make Madison's cover story more believable. 2 weeks later, both young women arrived in Denver, ostensibly for a speaking engagement at the University of Colorado about their experiences with cyberbullying and corporate manipulation. Aria Santos was everything the psychological profiles had said she would be: brilliant, passionate about social justice like her mother, and completely unprepared for the sophisticated manipulation tactics that were about to be deployed against her. She was a senior at Denver Academy, captain of the debate team, and planning to study pre-med at Stanford. The first contact came at a coffee shop near the university campus. Sophia and Madison were giving interviews about their friendship and their joint mission to help other bullying victims when Aria approached them, starstruck and eager to talk about her own experiences with academic pressure. "I can't believe you two are friends now," Aria said, her dark eyes bright with curiosity. "I mean, the video of the winter formal fight is legendary at our school. Everyone talks about how you stood up to them." Madison winced visibly. "That's not exactly how I want to be remembered. I was terrible to Sophia. I'm spending the rest of my life trying to make up for it." Over the following weeks, they built genuine relationships with Aria while the FBI monitored communications from the FAO corporate network. The sophistication of the operation was staggering. They had access to Aria's school records, her family's financial information, even her private social media messages. The psychological warfare tactics they developed made Madison's original campaign against Sophia look amateur by comparison. But something unexpected happened during their time in Denver. As Madison spent more time with Aria, listening to her dreams of becoming a doctor to help underserved communities, watching her struggle with the same pressures Madison had once used to torment others, something fundamental shifted in Madison's understanding of herself. "I could have been her friend," Madison told Sophia one evening as they reviewed the day's intelligence with their FBI handlers. "If I hadn't been so consumed with maintaining my social status, if I hadn't been so afraid of anyone threatening my position, Aria and I could have been real friends." "You still can be," Sophia replied gently. "When this is over, when the network is destroyed, you can tell her the truth, all of it. And then you can be the kind of friend you wish you'd been to me." The breakthrough came 3 weeks into the operation. The corporate network made a critical mistake. They tried to recruit Marcus Thompson, now a cybersecurity expert at MIT, to help them develop better digital surveillance tools for targeting teenagers. Marcus immediately contacted the FBI, providing them with the final pieces they needed to identify the entire network. The arrests happened simultaneously across 12 states. Corporate executives, private investigators, school administrators who'd been bribed to look the other way, and even some students who'd been recruited as long-term assets, all of them were taken into custody in a coordinated operation that made national headlines. Madison's role in bringing down the network earned her immunity from prosecution, but more importantly, it gave her a chance to truly make amends for her past actions. At the press conference announcing the arrests, she stood beside Sophia and spoke directly to the camera. "I want every teenager watching this to understand something," Madison said, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "There are adults out there who will try to turn you into a weapon against your own classmates. They'll appeal to your insecurities, your desire to fit in, your fear of being excluded. But popularity built on hurting others isn't worth having. Real strength comes from protecting people, not destroying them." Aria Santos, who had learned the full truth about Madison and Sophia's mission after the arrests, surprised everyone by asking to speak at the press conference as well. "Madison Pierce could have destroyed my life," Aria said, looking directly at the cameras. "Instead, she chose to protect me, even though she knew it meant risking her own safety. That's the kind of person I want to be, someone who chooses courage over convenience, someone who stands up for others even when it's hard." 6 months later, Sophia returned to Yale with a new understanding of her own journey. The corporate espionage network that had targeted her family was gone, its leaders in prison and its methods exposed to public scrutiny. But more importantly, she'd learned that healing, both personal and societal, was possible even in the aftermath of deliberate cruelty. Madison Pierce enrolled at the University of Colorado, majoring in social work with a focus on adolescent mental health. She and Aria Santos had indeed become real friends, working together on anti-bullying initiatives across the Denver school district. The girl who had once been a weapon of corporate interests had transformed herself into a shield for vulnerable students. As Sophia walked across the Yale campus, past students who now looked at her with respect rather than curiosity, she reflected on how far she'd traveled from that terrified girl who'd stepped off the school bus at Riverside Academy. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative, not just for her, but for everyone it had touched. The ripple effects of that winter formal night continued to spread, creating waves of change that reached far beyond any single school or social hierarchy. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that Sophia had learned through her hardest moments. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to let others define who you are, and then use your strength to help others find their own courage to do the same. 5 years after the winter formal that started it all, Sophia Martinez stood before the United Nations Youth Assembly in New York City, addressing delegates from 193 countries about the global crisis of corporate manipulation targeting children. At 23, she had become an internationally recognized advocate for youth protection rights, but today felt different. Today was personal. "Distinguished delegates," Sophia began, her voice carrying across the assembly hall, "I want to tell you about a dress. An emerald green dress that cost $47 and represented 3 months of my mother's overtime shifts. I want to tell you how that dress was torn apart by bullies at a school dance, and how that moment of cruelty led to the discovery of an international network that had been systematically destroying children's lives for corporate profit." In the audience, Maria Martinez wiped away tears of pride, sitting next to Coach Rivera, who had flown in from Connecticut, where he now ran 12 Phoenix Rising academies across New England. Madison Pierce sat in the third row, wearing a name tag identifying her as Dr. Madison Pierce, Ph.D. in child psychology, a title she'd earned through years of research into the long-term Effects of systematic bullying. The past 5 years had been a whirlwind of change, growth, and unexpected connections. The Project Mirror investigation had expanded globally, revealing that corporate manipulation of children wasn't limited to American schools. Similar networks had been operating in Europe, Asia, and South America, all using local social dynamics to pressure families involved in corporate whistleblowing or regulatory oversight. Sophia's testimony had been crucial in the prosecution of over 200 individuals across 17 countries. But more importantly, her story had sparked a global movement that transformed how schools, governments, and international organizations approach the protection of children from corporate retaliation. The girl who fought back in that ballroom isn't the hero of this story, Sophia continued. The real heroes are the educators who changed their policies, the legislators who passed new protection laws, and the thousands of young people who found the courage to speak up when they saw others being targeted. She gestured to a section of the audience where dozens of young activists sat, many of them former victims of corporate targeting who had transformed their trauma into advocacy. Among them was Arya Santos, now a medical student at Johns Hopkins, who had become a leading voice in exposing pharmaceutical industry retaliation against researchers. Families. The speech outlined the comprehensive reforms that had emerged from the investigations, the International Convention on Child Protection from Corporate Retaliation, new cybersecurity laws protecting minors from surveillance, and the Global Youth Advocacy network that now operated in 47 countries. But as Sophia reached the conclusion of her formal remarks, she did something unexpected. She departed from her prepared text and spoke from the heart. Before I close, I want to address something that many of you may be wondering about. What happened to the girl who tore my dress? What happened to Madison Pierce? Madison shifted uncomfortably in her seat, not expecting to be called out publicly. They had planned this moment together, but it still felt surreal. Madison Pierce is here today as Dr. Madison Pierce, one of the world's leading experts on adolescent trauma recovery. She has dedicated her life to understanding how young people can heal from the kind of systematic abuse we both experienced. She as a perpetrator who was being manipulated, and me as a victim who was being targeted. Sophia paused, making eye contact with Madison across the crowded hall. 5 years ago, I thought the greatest victory would be seeing her punished for what she did to me. Today, I know the greatest victory is seeing her use that experience to protect other children from going through what we went through. The applause was thunderous, but Sophia raised her hand for quiet. She had one more story to tell. Last month, I received a letter from a 15-year-old girl in Mumbai named Priya Sharma. Her mother is an environmental lawyer fighting illegal mining operations, and Priya was being systematically bullied at school by classmates who had been recruited by a corporate security firm. But Priya had seen my story online, and instead of suffering in silence, she documented everything and reported it to authorities. Sophia's voice grew stronger as she continued. The investigation that followed exposed a network targeting the children of environmental activists across South Asia. 17 young people were saved from psychological destruction, and the corporate executives responsible are now facing prosecution. But the most important part of this story is that Priya Sharma never had to throw a single punch. She never had to fight back physically because she had something more powerful. She had knowledge, support, and the understanding that she wasn't alone. The assembly hall was completely silent now, hanging on every word. That, Sophia said, is the world we've built together. A world where young people don't have to wait until they're pushed to their breaking point to get help. A world where the first response to targeting a child is protection, not punishment of the victim for fighting back. As the session concluded, delegates lined up to speak with Sophia, sharing their own country's experiences with corporate retaliation against families. The conversation that had started in a Connecticut ballroom had become a global dialogue about protecting the most vulnerable members of society. Later that evening, at a reception hosted by UNICEF, Sophia found herself in a quieter corner with Madison, Aria, and Marcus, who had flown in from his new position as Chief Technology Officer for the Global Youth Protection Initiative. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't fought back that night?" Madison asked, swirling her wine glass thoughtfully. Sophia considered the question. "Honestly, I think I would have transferred schools again, probably would. Have finished high school quietly somewhere else, and the entire Project Mirror network would still be operating. How many kids would be suffering right now if that video hadn't gone viral? Sometimes I have nightmares about it," Madison confessed. "About the person I was becoming before everything fell apart. I was so consumed with maintaining power that I couldn't see how empty that power actually was." Aria, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "I think about the timeline too, but differently. In my version, you two never become enemies in the TICO. First place. You meet as freshmen, recognize each other's strength, and become friends immediately. You build each other up instead of tearing each other down." "That's a beautiful thought," Marcus said. "But would we have had the impact we've had without the conflict? Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what's really important." Their conversation was interrupted by a young woman approaching their table, a teenager with bright purple hair and a confident stride that reminded Sophia of herself at that age. "Excuse me, are you Sophia Martinez?" the girl asked. "I'm Kelly Washington from the Denver Youth Advocacy Council. I just wanted to thank you for what you've done. My little brother was being targeted last year because my mom is investigating police misconduct, and your protocols helped us identify and stop it before it destroyed him." Stories like Kelly's had become common for Sophia, young people whose lives had been protected by the systems they'd built, families who'd been shielded from corporate retaliation, schools that had transformed their cultures to prevent systematic abuse. As the evening wound down, Sophia stepped onto the terrace overlooking the East River, the lights of the city sparkling like stars in the darkness. Madison joined her a few minutes later, and they stood in comfortable silence, watching boats navigate the dark water. "Do you forgive me?" Madison asked quietly. "Really, truly forgive me?" Sophia turned to look at her former tormentor, now her colleague, and, in many ways, her friend. "Madison, I forgave you the day I realized you were being used just like I was. But more than that, I'm grateful to you." "Grateful? You gave me something I didn't know I needed. You showed me that I was stronger than I thought I was. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. You pushed me to discover who I really am underneath all the fear and uncertainty." Madison smiled through tears she was trying to hide. "I still can't believe that the worst thing I ever did led to the best thing I've ever been part of." "That's the thing about choices," Sophia replied. "Every moment gives us a chance to decide who we want to be. You chose to be different. That matters more than the person you used to be." As they prepared to leave, Sophia pulled out her phone and showed Madison a photo, the emerald green dress, carefully preserved in a frame in her apartment in New Haven. "I kept it," she explained. "Not as a reminder of what happened, but as a reminder of what's possible. Every tear in that fabric represents a moment when I could have given up, could have accepted their definition of who I was supposed to be. But I didn't, and neither did you in the end." The final surprise of the evening came as they waited for taxis outside the UN building. A car pulled up, and out stepped Coach Rivera with a young woman they didn't recognize, a teenager with short black hair and intense brown eyes. "Sophia Madison," Coach Rivera said with a broad smile. "I want you to meet Rosa Delgado. She's 16. Her mother is investigating corporate price fixing in the pharmaceutical industry, and she's been dealing with some familiar problems at her school in Houston." Rosa stepped forward with the confident stance of someone who had been training in martial arts. Coach Rivera told me I should meet the people who made it possible for kids like me to get help before things get out of hand. My school installed the new anti-targeting protocols last month, and the corporate security firm that was manipulating students backed off immediately when they realized they were being monitored. Sophia felt a familiar surge of pride and purpose. This was why everything had been worth it, so that Rosa Delgado would never have to stand alone in a ballroom with her dress torn to pieces, never have to choose between submission and violence, and never have to discover her own strength through trauma. "What do you want to do when you graduate?" Madison asked Rosa. "International law," Rosa replied immediately. "I want to make sure kids like us are protected everywhere, not just in countries with good advocacy programs." As the taxis arrived, and the group prepared to go their separate ways, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. It had started with cruelty, escalated through violence, and transformed into something beautiful, a global network of protection and support that ensured no child would have to face corporate retaliation alone. The girl who had once hidden behind books, desperate to become invisible, had become a voice that could be heard around the world. The girl who had once used her power to destroy others had become a healer dedicated to helping victims recover. And together, they had proven that even the worst circumstances could be transformed into forces for good. As Sophia's taxi pulled away from the UN building, heading toward LaGuardia Airport and her flight back to New Haven, she closed her eyes and thought about the letter she would write to her younger self, the terrified 16-year-old stepping off that school bus at Riverside Academy. "You're going to face something terrible," she would write. "People are going to try to break you, to convince you that you don't belong, that you don't matter. And for a while, you're going to believe them. But on a winter night in a ballroom filled with people who think they're better than you, you're going to discover something incredible. You're stronger than anyone imagined, including yourself. And that strength won't just save you. It will save thousands of others. The dress they tear will become a symbol of transformation. The punches you throw will echo around the world. The courage you find in your darkest moment will light the way for young people you'll never meet. So when that moment comes, when you're standing there humiliated and angry and afraid, remember this: you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for every kid who's ever been told they don't belong, every young person who's ever been used as a weapon against their own family, every teenager who just needs someone to show them that fighting back is possible. And when the dust settles and the cameras stop flashing and the world moves on to the next story, you'll discover the most important truth of all. The real victory isn't in defeating your enemies. It's in turning them into allies, trauma into purpose, and pain into power that protects others. That emerald green dress? It's going to change the world. The taxi merged into the flow of traffic heading toward the airport, carrying Sophia back to her life as a graduate student, advocate, and protector of children she would never meet, but would always fight for. Behind her, the lights of New York City glittered like promises in the darkness, and ahead lay a future where no young person would have to face corporate retaliation alone. The girl who had once been torn down had risen to tear down the systems that threatened others. And in doing so, she had discovered that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is transform your worst moment into someone else's salvation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.